A warm welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us for our fourth in a series of induction briefings. This was particularly serving Monmouthshire local authority, but obviously I know we've got some colleagues on the call from other local authorities. So lots of information to share with you this morning. Hannah will take us through quite a lot of detail around the changes for induction that will commence from September 2024. She will hopefully outline some of the change in roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders during the NQT induction process. And obviously, then to support with that, give you a little bit more detail around the NQT and early career professional learning offer. And finally, and something that we know is really, really important as a help us in providing good quality induction support is some detail around the funding arrangements and how those things are slightly changing again from September. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Hannah, and there'll be lots of opportunities for questions. So diolch yn fawr, morning, Hannah.
Hey, thanks, Deb. Yeah, morning, everybody. So we're going to start really by just looking at the changes that have already come into play in induction. So lots of you on the call I can see are experienced IMs, EVs in terms of supporting the induction process already. So you'll be aware of a number of these when the consultation went out a couple of years ago now. And the changes were made in relation to the flexibility in terms of how long an NQT can undertake induction. So we can now issue a result after a minimum of 110 sessions have been completed. However, the majority of NQTs take around 380 to 3 full terms of employment to complete induction. But this has allowed some flexibility in the system to be able to issue results to those who are ready but hadn't quite reached that 380 session mark. There's also the 5-year time frame that has been reintroduced. So NQTs that have gained their QTS have 5 years from that point to complete the induction process, or 5 years from November 22 when this new regulation came in, if their QTS was gained prior to that. We can also allow now NQTs to undertake their induction in PRUs, and I know lots of NQTs have taken up this opportunity now and have completed the induction process there. And now some of the changes that were in progress are starting to come in, and we will update you now on the changes that are coming in from September 2024. So from this September for the next academic year, we're going to take you through the headlines first of all, and then break each one down on the following slides and provide an opportunity for you to ask any questions as we go through the session today. So if we move on to the next slide, these are, in a nutshell, if you like, all of the changes that are coming into play from September. So all NQTs will now be allocated and supported by an induction mentor. So that is the same for supply teachers that previously would have had an external verifier. They will now just be supported by an induction mentor. And the role of the external verifier is no longer going to be present within the induction support arrangements. There is the new role that has been created of the validator, and they are there to quality assure the induction process. And they will be assigned to a sample of NQTs of approximately 50% across the region, and they'll be deployed at the discretion of the AB and the regional lead officer to support and QA the induction process. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about how that role works and how we hope to provide support to schools through the validation process a little bit later. EWC will still be providing funding, but you'll notice no longer for EVs, but for NQTs, induction mentors and validators. And then a big change then in terms of the requirements on NQTs, they will no longer be able or be required to complete 10 to 20 PLEs, but instead they'll complete 2 professional inquiry projects over the course of the induction period. This is very much in line with the changes that are coming throughout initial teacher education and the work initial teacher education students will have already been involved in terms of research and inquiry, shaping their own practice, and the role of research and inquiry in terms of the wider educational landscape. There has been a pilot undertaken nationally, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, and a welcome step here from the NQTs and the IMs that were involved during that pilot. Okay, so we're going to take you through now kind of each role and responsibility for all the stakeholders involved in induction. I'm going to start with head teachers. So as a head teacher, you'll know you have responsibility to provide support to NQTs within your setting. We know that staffing can be very fluid and very flexible. So we're asking every school to be NQT ready, whether that means you're definitely employing an NQT from September, or that you haven't at the moment, but at any point there may be that opportunity where an NQT may come into your setting and be part of your staff. So we do ask that you appoint a trained induction mentor, and you have that person ready to support any NQT that may be working in your setting, and that you'll be responsible then as the head for making sure that mentor has the appropriate time allocation to undertake all of those mentoring activities, as they are the pivotal member of staff, if you like, in terms of supporting that induction process. The NQT is also entitled to that 10% non-contact time, and ensuring they have that opportunity then to engage in the professional learning offer and all the activities related to their NQT induction. Funding for this will still be released by the EWC at the end of every term, and again we'll go through that in a little bit more detail a bit later on. So in terms of then the new role, if we move on to the next slide, the validator role. The validators are going to sample the mentors in the process. So even though they're going to be allocated to 50% of NQTs, this is so that we can link a validator to an NQT's profile, and this will be 50% across the region. But we hope then that the validators will be there to quality assure the induction process. So really, an NQT's first point of contact will always be their induction mentor. For all of their support, for all of their questions, for their lesson observations, it will always be the mentor that provides that support. The validator will come in if you are assigned a validator, and they will work with the induction mentor to quality assure the process. So they'll look at the targets being set, they'll look at the reviews, the lesson observations, the inquiry projects, and they'll identify if everything is as it should be and working well and the support is there for the NQT, or they'll be able to signpost to any additional support that may be needed in terms of perhaps professional learning for the IM or for the NQT to try and support the process. Now, the allocation of validators will be at the discretion of the AB and the regional lead officer, very much in the way that EVs are currently allocated. We will allocate an NQT to a validator, and they will then get in contact with that IM of that NQT and arrange for that quality assurance process to be undertaken. It's a very fluid and flexible model, so you may not stay as a validator with the same NQT throughout their induction period, because if everything is working well and that induction mentor has had all of the professional learning, they're providing that support, it may be that you are then deployed somewhere else to go and support and QA another NQT mentor in a different setting. The funding is still the same. It will come from the Education Workforce Council directly to schools at the end of each term, and it's £400 per term per NQT supported. So if we just go on to the next slide, and I can just go into a little bit more detail there about that funding and about the arrangements. So if you have an NQT in your school and a validator has been assigned, your head teacher will receive an email to say a validator has been assigned to this NQT, and they'll be in contact with the induction mentor to arrange the QA of the process. The NQTs themselves may see the validator's name appear on their profile, but like I said, really for them, their point of contact is very much the induction mentor, and the validator is there to QA the process. So they may work with the mentor looking at the targets, the lesson obs, and QA in the process, but they wouldn't necessarily in the first instance have much contact with the NQTs themselves. It would be through the induction mentor. And the flexibility there in terms of the validator role, like I've already said, you may not stay with the same NQT, your allocations may change quite regularly as we QA the induction process. And the aim is that although it's 50% of NQTs, once we get our allocations in the autumn term, we know that we can have up to 300 approximately NQTs across the regions, but they're not spread out across 300 schools. So we would hope at some point we'd be able to get a validator into every school, is our aim if we can, at some point through the induction process, because we know sometimes our larger secondaries have a large number of NQTs, and we'll be able to hopefully deploy validators in that way, so that at some point every induction mentor will have that support of a validator. And in terms of the professional learning then for validators, on the next slide we've got here what you will be expected to do. So we will expect a validator, if you'd like to apply for this role, and we will provide information later in the PowerPoint for you to do so, that you have existing experience as either an external verifier or you've previously been an induction mentor. So you understand the process in terms of supporting development priority setting, the reviews, the lesson observations. And we will provide then a briefing session in the autumn term, just like we would have done previously for the external verifier role. We will take you through in detail the role, the expectations, and we'll provide examples of from the pilot of the professional inquiry projects. So you'll be able to look at those and know what to expect when you're going out to QA the process. We'll also then, in addition to the national briefing sessions, hold termly drop-in sessions for validators where you'll be able to share information around your QA activities, and we can use this then to redeploy you in that role as validators as needed across the region. So there'll be that opportunity for communication in terms of how the role is going and any additional support that may be needed. So I'm going to take a breath at that point and just pause to see if there's any questions in relation to the validator role or any of the head teacher responsibilities that we've shared with you so far. And we'll be going into the induction mentor and NQT during the next part of the session. Gone into silence, not sure if it's information overload. Hopefully you're able to process all the information that we provided this morning. We will share the PowerPoint with you so you can refer back. Okay. So if we move on then to induction mentors, the induction mentor now is going to be a really key role for our NQTs in the system. So what we'd like to ensure now is that you as a school have identified that member of staff and that they have the opportunity to access all the PL they need in order to be able to successfully support the NQTs, because they will be the ones now that are still responsible, as they would have been previously, for the development priorities and the reviews, the completing lesson observations, and for supporting with the professional inquiry projects. So we will provide during our briefing sessions for mentors in the autumn term examples of inquiry projects from the pilot, so you'll be able to have a look at them and think about how you may be able to support your NQTs when they're forming their inquiries and how to structure them. So there'll be a lot of support provided during those briefing sessions. And as induction mentors then, you will be the one now who makes that final review and recommendation at the end, as you do already, but obviously there won't be that external verifier there to also make that judgment. It will be for you to make that final recommendation. So the induction mentors then will be invited to attend a moderation session to look at other profiles, to look at inquiry projects, and there's a supportive network there really to answer any questions you may have about the process and about the support that's been provided in your role as induction mentor. So there's an additional level there in terms of the induction mentor expectation to take part in those moderation sessions moving forward. On the next slide, what we've got then is just the kind of breakdown of what that professional learning looks like for our induction mentors. So it still is that national briefing session on Teams in the autumn term. There's also still running the National Induction Mentor Development Programme. So I would suggest any new induction mentors, this is really beneficial for them. We break down the role, we'll look in more detail at how we can support with the professional inquiry projects with our NQTs, and kind of at each step of the induction process, what the IM should be doing in their role to best support the NQTs within their settings. There'll be then that opportunity to attend the moderation sessions. And I would say if you haven't got a validator allocated at a certain point in time, and you have any concerns over NQT's progress at any point, you've got my email contact there. You can reach out and we're happy to provide support with the induction process if there's any concerns you may have about the process itself or about any progress queries with your NQT, please do reach out to us and we'll be able to provide that support to mentors. So again, I'm just going to take a quick pause and see if there's any questions in terms of the mentoring role. No? Okay. So we will move on, and we keep putting these question bits in. So if something does come to you, please do feel free to jump in and ask a question. So what we'll do now, we'll have a look at the newly qualified teachers themselves and their expectations. So all the changes we're talking about at the moment are for NQTs who are entering their NQT induction from September 24. So if they're starting their induction journey in September, they'll no longer be required to complete the 10 to 20 PLEs against the 32 standard descriptors, but instead they'll be asked to complete these 2 inquiry projects, demonstrating that holistic progress around the 5 standards. So the aim of the project is very much that they are looking at their own practice, they're looking at their development priorities, and they're focusing on an area that is really key to their own personal development. And hopefully then through inquiry, reflection, through looking at research, through trial and error in the classroom, they'll be able to develop an area of their practice, reflect on that critically, and look at the impact then that it's had on their own practice and ultimately the learners that they are working with as well. So the projects may start in the autumn term, the first one may finish in the spring term, and the second start in the spring term and finish in the summer. But we know by the nature of these projects, some are going to be bigger than others, some may need revisiting in the summer term. So there is real flexibility here for you as mentors to work with your NQTs and really decide on how best to support them in shaping this to inform their practice and their development moving forward. There'll be 1 lesson observation per term undertaken by the induction mentor. This can then support your holistic view of progress that the NQT is making, linking it back to their inquiry projects and their development priorities. And that's the way we're going to look for progress against the standards in terms of how the NQTs are progressing throughout their induction. And in terms of professional learning support for NQTs, we've structured it so that in term 1, they still have those 2 online national briefing sessions. The first one focusing on, the basics of how they launch their induction profile, how they access parts of their profile and the expectations of the induction process. And the second one then really focusing on their professional inquiry project. So we'll share examples with the NQTs like we will with the validators and the IMs in their briefing sessions, and we'll unpick, all the elements that they'll need to undertake to be able to complete their projects. The rest of the national sessions are then run in our EAS partner schools. So the NQTs will be able to sign up to the remaining 3 days in the autumn term and attend those in-person nationally agreed content days in our partner schools. And this is supported by the NQT network meeting then that provides that opportunity for them to collaborate with peers across the region. In term 2, we've got the local offer then that really focuses on that element of live practice and pedagogy hosted in our partner schools, allowing the NQTs to observe and engage in live practice and reflect on their own practice, and again supported by the NQT network meeting. And then in term 3 plus into their early career, there's that real opportunity for the NQTs to bespoke their professional learning offer, to really select from the offer that's there in terms of where their development priority needs are, and access PL that's most relevant to them from the offer. And again, this is supported by network meetings and where they are in terms of most appropriate PL to support their development moving forward. So that's going to be the structure in terms of PL to support the induction process and into that early career journey as well. Just a note now on the next slide in terms of those continuing NQTs. So if there are NQTs in the system that are not ready for a pass result at the end of this term, and they're going to continue into September, they will stay on the same system that they started on. So they won't be expected to complete inquiry projects. They'll continue with their PLEs that they've already started. The only change for them will come in terms of the EV role, because the EV role will not exist from September. So they will be supported by their induction mentor if they're in school, or they will still be supported by an induction mentor if they're on supply. So what we're going to undertake in the next few weeks is looking at those supply teachers that are likely to roll into September and onwards, contacting their current external mentors to ask them if they would be interested in taking on the role of induction mentor and signing up for that role, so that there's that continuity wherever possible for those NQTs in terms of that named person of support. But we will be writing out to all EVs and asking them if they would like to take on the role of either an induction mentor for supply teachers or that validator role. And in some instances, if you've got the capacity, you may be able to sign up for both and be work with supply teachers as induction mentor, and then different IMs then for that validator role. So from September, I think the key message is that that external verifier role will not be existing within the system. And we'll be looking for everyone to sign up to either be an IM or a validator, and we'll share that information with you shortly. So again, I'm just going to pause there before we get onto the funding questions, which I'm sure will be coming next. But are there any questions about that so far? Okay, taking the silence to mean hopefully it's all sinking in and that there's no questions at the moment. So in terms of funding, there's no change to the way it's allocated. It will still be allocated retrospectively at the end of each term. It will still come directly from the EWC to schools. And really important to note, it's really important that you send off the induction notification forms as schools as quickly as possible when you've employed an NQT. This will name the induction mentor for your school NQTs. And then it will also be really important you send the claim form off at the end of each term or at the end of the employment of that NQT if it comes before the end of term. And that will allow the EWC to release that funding associated then with your NQTs. So for a full-time NQT, it's still the same. It's £900 at the end of each term. The IM is funded at £400 per term per NQT. So that's whether you're an IM in a school setting or an IM for a supply teacher. That's the funding that will be received. And then the validators similarly are funded at £400 per term per NQT supported. So that's the way the funding arrangements will work. And it just is the same as schools sending off the induction notification form. If you are an induction mentor working with a supply teacher, really important, one of the questions you keep asking them is, have they logged their sessions with the EWC? Because they need to do that to release the funding for the work that you'll be doing in terms of supporting them. So we can see that that NQT is actively undertaking the induction process. So again, we will run through all of that in the briefing session, but just to draw your attention to the importance of those forms in terms of triggering the funding being released to schools. Okay, so I'll pause there. Any questions on the funding just before we access the final part of the session today? Okay, so the final part we're going to have a look at is the process of cause for concern. So very similar to how it currently runs. If you have any concerns over progress around the NQT within your setting or around an NQT on supply, the first conversations will be between the NQT, the induction mentor and the head teacher, and you'll look to put in place a support plan at a school level which will break down the targets already set on their induction profile into smarter, more manageable steps within a set time frame that you will then provide additional support and review. If at that point, once that school level action plan has been reviewed a couple of times and there's still not that progress you would hope to see, get in contact with Deb and myself and we can look at then if there are grounds to make that cause for concern, that official process start. And then there'll be a meeting held between us and yourselves. We'll run through all of the areas of concern and areas for development. The NQT will be issued with a letter then that outlines all of those areas in which development is required, and a plan will be put together in terms of the support and timeframe set for review. A letter, like I said, is sent to the NQT outlining all of that, and then the induction mentor will need to press the cause of concern button on the profile once all of those steps have been followed. So what I would say is if you ever have any concerns at all about NQT's progress, do reach out to us, get in contact, and we can help support you with either starting that school level plan or looking at if a cause of concern now needs to be initiated and what the order of steps are that we need to follow for that. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any concerns at all. So I did say that we'd be sharing now with you the information about becoming an induction mentor or a validator. So just to reiterate, if you're becoming an induction mentor in your own setting, you don't need to complete this form. You would just sign, like you always have done, on your induction notification form. But this is to support supply teachers across the region. So if you are currently an EV or have been an EV or EM, or you've been an induction mentor in your own school but would like to support outside of your school now, we are requesting that everybody completes the form below. This will allow us to gather your details and upload them to the EWC so that they can issue the right access then when NQTs are allocated to you to be able to view their profiles. So in the same way that we used to do for external verifiers, the process will be that we'll gather your details, we'll share them with the EWC, and then once you've attended a briefing session in the autumn term, we'll look to allocate NQTs to you to support. And that may be a fluid application. We know that we like to do the bulk of applications wherever possible in the autumn term, but we know NQTs, especially on supply, join us at all points throughout the academic year. So it's good to keep up to date, checking into your accounts to see if any additional NQTs have been added, and to stay in contact with the NQTs you're currently supporting. So we will be asking everybody to reapply if they would like to become an induction mentor. And in the same way, the same process applies to validators. You'll need to apply below, so we've got your contact details, and then the right level of access can be granted via your EWC login. You'll be expected to attend that briefing session and then those termly meetings so that we can check in on the QA process and provide any additional support or reallocation to different NQTs throughout the region. So this is a more fluid role in terms of the NQTs that you'll be supporting, because you won't necessarily stay with the same NQT throughout the entirety of the induction process. And again, we'd like members of staff that have perhaps previously been EVs or IMs that have a good understanding of the process already to be able to complete this QA role. And again, we'll share with EWC the details so that you've got the correct access then once the allocations are made in the autumn term. So that does bring us to the end of the session today. I know Deb will share the PowerPoint with you, and we've got the recording so you can revisit anything you'd like to. We have set the dates for all of the briefing sessions, and we'll share those in the partner school meeting a little bit later, so you can get those in the diary. But if you do have any questions following the session today, please don't hesitate to contact either Deb or myself, and we'll be happy to support. Thank you for coming. Hopefully it was a useful session with lots of information to take away and think about.
Thanks, Hannah. Can I just ask,
Yeah.
you know, if the EV at the moment has a supply teacher who hasn't finished and maybe needs part of next term, what's the process for them? Do we still do that, or do they contact you directly? What's the...
So I will be writing out to all the EVs, especially those in that exact situation, and asking them if they would like to apply to become an IM. Because in the best case scenario, what I'd really like to do where they've got capacity is continue with the same NQT, so there's consistency for that NQT.
Yeah, I know a couple of mine have got supplies, but I'm not sure where they are, so I don't know whether it applies to them, but I thought I'd check that today so I can get onto them and get back to you.
Asking them to apply as an IM and then making a note to the EWC to just continue that support, so that there's that consistency really for that NQT in terms of the person supporting them. So wherever possible, that's what we'd like to happen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Okay, I'm not sure if we've got any other questions, but a big thank you to Hannah for taking us through all those changes. Lots to get get our heads around and consider in terms of ready for September. So if you do have any further questions, I know some of you will be joining us for the briefing session this evening. I know Alexis is with us this evening, this morning rather. We are running another session for Monmouthshire later on, which people have been invited to as well. So because I know there was an event running today for Monmouthshire Heads, so we will be running a second session for them, of which the date's been shared already. So thanks very much. We'll make sure you get copies of all the PowerPoints, as Hannah said, and send you the recording. But if not, that's the session concluded today. So diolch yn fawr iawn, and see you all shortly, I'm sure. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Hannah, very much.
Thanks both.
That's all.
Bye.
Thanks, take care, bye.
Thank you.